and we'll also talk about the curriculum in depth, right? What are we going to cover on the stream? So just to give you a brief background, right? I am from a tech background. I've been working in the industry for more than 7 years, and that too solid into Palo Alto networks. So I'll be giving you a depth training, right, on what you are requiring from an administrative perspective, right? Understanding the features, understanding how the firewall works, and most importantly, how to troubleshoot issues, right? Which is very critical for your day-to-day activities. All right, let me get a screen share ready. All right, I hope the screen is visible. Right. So
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah. So why Palo Alto networks, right? That's the first question. Why would you go for Palo Alto networks firewall training, right? See, honestly, there are a lot of vendors out there, right, in the industry who is doing firewalling, right? But currently, Palo Alto is the hot cake in the market. Why? Because it comes with a lot of features, right, which all the competitors are not able to compete with, and the product is actually very complex in the design and the setup part. But once that is done, right, the security that it provides is very immense. So the idea behind it is that the product is leading the global chain in a way that nobody else is coming close to the feature set that Palo Alto is providing. And as a result, all major companies, you can name any companies, right? They would have one or two Palo Altos at the least, right? It could be an entry-level model, it could be a VM, it could be a physical model, but when you take a global perspective, Palo Alto, right, is leading the industry, right, and next generation firewalls, and they're coming up with a lot of other solutions, including the cloud solution Prisma, right, which is just a cloud alternative instead of on-prem, right? Everything is moving to cloud. So yeah, that's the future going forward, but the technology remains the same. So just talking about the basics of Palo Alto, right? So it's a next generation firewall, right? That means it's a zone-based stateful firewall, right? That would mean it remembers the state of a connection. That means when somebody is accessing something, right, from your company, right, a person is trying to access Facebook, the firewall is intelligent enough to know that, right, there is a session being built towards YouTube, right, and the reply traffic coming from the YouTube server, right, gets automatically allowed without the need of, right, policies on the return traffic, right? So it's session aware or, right, a stateful firewall, which all vendors are typically now, right? Now, going to zone, right? What is a security zone? So to talk about zone, right? Let's take a firewall, right? You can compare it with Cisco, Checkpoint, Fortinet, anything, right? So Palo Alto firewall, right? You have multiple interfaces which you can configure. You can plug your switches, right, inside. So let's say I use E1 bar 1, right, and connect a switch, right, and let's say this is the core switch, right? In the company, right, we have a layered approach, right? We have a core switch, we have the distribution layer, right? So then we have the access layer. So multiple switches connected, right? So the idea is at the end, somewhere a user is sitting at his desk, right, who has an Ethernet connection, who's trying to access the internet. So the idea behind this is when a traffic is coming, right, and so let's say this and another interface of the firewall is connected to the internet, right, to the cloud.
I'm very sorry to break this flow and interrupt you, but it seems like your voice is, you're getting a lot of echo, and it seems like you're sitting in some kind of auditorium.
Is it?
So it's not so clear, and it's one other guy who's reporting the same issue.
Okay, all right. Just give me a second. All right, how about now?
Still, it seems it's there.
No, still not good.
Yep, a bit.
That is it. Okay. All right. Give me 1 second. All right, that should be better now. How is it?
A bit better, I would say. Yeah.
All right, do let me know. All right, perfect. Do let me know, right? If you have an audio issue, do let me know. So so we were talking about a user, right, sitting at office, trying to connect to internet, right? So you have a firewall in the office, right, which is connected to the Ethernet 1x1, right? The internal switching architecture is connected to an internal interface. So the idea behind this is you have multiple interfaces on the firewall, which you plug to different network. It can be internal network or it can be the ISP network, right? So the typical architecture is you connect your internal network on one end, the other end you connect it to the internet, and every traffic goes through the firewall, right? And it does the inspection for you. So in older firewalls, right, we were using, right, the waterfall architecture or the security level, right? If you take Cisco, for example. So now we have zones, right? Every interface you specify it as a zone, right? It can be trust, right? You can call it inside, right? Whatever you like, right? It's a user configurable name that you can use as per your convenience, right? Let's say trust and untrust, right? So this is the normal nomenclature as such, right? So any traffic, right? So all your internal traffic will come through this interface, which is part of the trust network, and it goes out of untrust, right? So the idea behind this zone is that every interface is attached to a zone, and the traffic flow is controlled using security policies. So it's like a checkpost, right? You can say it. So what happens is you create a policy from trust to untrust, you allow, right, traffic. You can specify what you want to allow. You can specify, hey, I want to allow HTTPS, or I want to allow SMTP, right? So these things should work. I don't want to allow, let's say, BitTorrent, right? So BitTorrent traffic will not exit out of the traffic, of the firewall. That's the whole concept. So zone-based firewall is that the policies are basically, the traffic control is based on these zones that we are defining in the interfaces. So in Palo, right, in Palo specifically, or you can take any firewall as such, right? For any firewall, there are two planes ideally, right? That is a standard architecture. A firewall will have something known as a management plane and something known as a data plane, right? So it just means that it has two CPUs basically. You can call it as, right, a device which has two CPUs, right? One CPU is dedicated for the management plane, the other one for data plane. So the data plane, it's easy to remember as such, right? Data plane, that plane basically takes care of your data. Whatever traffic that you're trying to send out or inside, right, it goes through the data plane. Whereas the management plane is used for managing the firewall, right? That means there are a lot of functions that the firewall has to do, right? For example, updates, right? It has to take care of updates. It has to send logs out to external tools or teams or Panorama, right? So, or let's say, right, you want to make a change, you want to add a policy, or you want to remove a policy, and you want to save that change. All of that is happening on the management plane, right? So one more example, right? What about dynamic routing, right? You have a BGP or OSPF routing protocol running, right? Who takes care of this forming neighborship, right, with your peers, right? Learning the routes, and then, right, taking care of that route changes. All of that is done by the MP, right, or the management plane, which is basically doing all the basic functionality that is necessary for the firewall to efficiently process the traffic through the data plane, right? The data plane, basically what it does is, it does the difficult part of the whole firewalling process, which is the inspection, right? It breaks down the packet, inspects it, right? So if you have SSL inspection and all, right, it acts like a man in the middle, right, doing a SSL inspection on your traffic, right? comparing or doing a signature matching, right? And finding if it is malicious traffic, finding if it is allowed or not, right? If it is blocked or not, right? And if everything is good, right, we send the packet out. So two planes as such, right? Management plane and the data plane, right? This is the basic architecture of a firewall, right? When you talk about a high-end series like a 7K series and all, right, a different plane is coming, which we can talk about on a later day, right? But this is the basic architecture for most of the firewalls, right, up to 5K, right? So that's the two planes as such, right? And there is all devices, right? All layer 3 devices comes with an interface, which we all know as management interface, right? Every interface, every device, right? Every L3 device normally comes with a management interface, right? So what is a management interface? To manage that device, right? You take your home router, right? It comes with the static default IP 192.168.1.1, right? Same logic here, right? When you get a brand new firewall, it comes with that 192.168.1.1, right? And the default password admin, right? You can just SSH into it, right? Using port 22, or you can go ahead and access the GUI. Just connect it to your network, right? Access HTTPS 192.168.1.1, right? You'll get the GUI and you can enter the username password and log into the firewall, right? So this management interface from a Palo Alto perspective is very important. Why? Because most of the management traffic, right, MP traffic goes via this link, right? So it can be going to the update server, right, fetching the dynamic updates, right, new application or thread signatures, or it can be regular software updates, right? Your PAN-OS software update, you want to upgrade from 7.1 or 8.1 to 9.1 or 10.1, right? You download it from the software portal. It's all coming, right, through the management plane, right? Any questions up until this point? We good? Okay. All right. So that's the basic overview, right, of the firewall, right? We have in Palo, right, we have a concept of SP3, right? We call it as SP3, right? Or single pass parallel processing, right? Single pass parallel processing. So S and 3 Ps, that is what it means, right? SP3 architecture. What it means is that your traffic, right, when it goes through the firewall, right? Typical firewalls, what it does is you send a packet to the firewall, right? It goes through various stages where it goes through different aspects of inspection, right? So it could be antivirus inspection happening on one side, then packet goes for, right, malware, right, or different URL filtering, right, different stages. Whereas in Palo, right, the architecture is that the packet comes into the firewall, we place that packet into a memory, right? Then it goes through all of the processing at one go. What happens is different components or processes basically take care of all of this security features, that is anti-malware analysis or anti-spyware analysis, right? So what it does is your packet is stored into the memory, then it does its processing on that memory location, right, and finds if there is anything wrong in that packet, right, any kind of malicious content in that traffic. If so, it identifies it. So the packet goes through a single stage of processing where everything happens on one go instead of, right, chaining it or queuing it for different stages. That is what an SP3 architecture is, right? We can talk about it when we come to a specific session on this topic, right? It's a very interesting topic to talk about. So that's one of the leading factors about Palo Alto, right? The SP3 architecture, which is, right, achieved something using a hardware, something known as an FPGA, right? A field programmable gate array, or an ASIC chip, right? Which is used for all of this to achieve a very fast rate of processing, right? So a firewall's success is based on how fast the firewall can do all of this inspection and send the traffic out, right? You buy a legacy firewall, right? It takes forever to process it. That So every second or every millisecond that you lose is adding latency in the connection, right? That latency gets added on, right? Which is not what a customer wants, right? So fast processing is the key here in this industry, right? Firewalling industry. And that too, we don't compromise on security, of course. Right.
Hello.
Yep. Hello.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, tell me.
Yes, sir. My name is Bilal, sir.
Yep.
Hello. Sir, I was asking, like, in Windows, we have a firewall, and that firewall is only responsible for protecting the inbound connection, the connection which are coming to inside our computers.
Right.
But the outbound, but the connection which are going outside, that is not protected by firewall. So, like, I mean, if a hacker is able to take a reverse shell, so reverse shell is the connection is going from a computer. So these,
Understood. Yeah.
so these firewalls which we have in on our network, like Palo Alto or maybe Checkpoint, so these are the working of these firewalls are same, like, or they are more better?
No. So the Windows firewall, right? That's a software-based firewall, right? It is not capable of something known as DPI or deep packet inspection, right? The Windows firewall, right, is totally on up to layer 4 is what you have visibility. That means the Windows software-based firewall can only look into what is the protocol, what is the source or destination port, right? What is the basic application? That's it, right? It does not have that visibility into what is the data payload, right? A packet is coming, it looks into, okay, what is the source IP, destination IP, source port, destination port, protocol number. That's it, right?
Okay.
That is all it has visibility. Whereas a firewall, right, a dedicated firewall has a DPI capability, which basically what it does is it looks into the data payload and sees what is that. So you talked about reverse shell, right? So
Yes, sir.
that's an incoming SSH connection, right? On a reverse style, right? The connection is outbound, but the traffic is coming right inwards. That
Yes, sir.
can be detected by a DPI engine, right? The DPI engine can look into the traffic and it sees that, okay, this is an HTTP connection going outside. So you can take an example, right? A common video that you would see is, right, Kali Linux, right? Or Backtrack, Metasploit,
Yes, sir.
reverse shell
Yes.
mechanism, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That uses an HTTP connect to inject that reverse connection, shell connection through the HTTP.
Yes,
This
sir.
will not go through. Why? Because let's say there is a Palo Alto in between, right? It does the deep packet inspection. It sees that, okay, there is a port 80 or port 443 connection going through, right? It has an HTTP initially, but there is a reverse shell. That is, there is SSH traffic coming inside. So how does the firewall understand that? There is something known as App ID engine in Palo Alto, which makes it which makes it capable to identify the traffic based on something known as an application signature, right? An app ID signature. There is a unique signature that the vendor creates for each type of application. So when it sees something different in that payload, right? So instead of HTTP signature, it would see, right, in a tunneled SSL connection SSH connection coming through. It can easily detect it and it can block it, right? Don't compare a enterprise level firewall with a Windows firewall, right?
Yes,
That
sir.
is
Yes,
it's absolute, right? You don't see any enterprise running Windows firewall, like you are at the mercy of your God in that case. Right.
And one more question, sir. Like, sir, in routers, we configure ACA. For example, if I block HTTP connection for any host. But, sir, if that particular host turns on the VPN, he is able to access that HTTP service. So
Right.
this happens in firewall?
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic enterprise scenario, right? Working people might be able to understand that, hey, I have Facebook blocked in my office network. I can't access Facebook. Let me try connecting to a VPN, right?
Yes,
Let me
sir.
try
Yes,
using
sir.
a proxy.
Yes,
These
sir.
things does not work through an enterprise firewall, right? Why? Because typical enterprise architecture is that they will block all out, or we call it as pass-through traffic. All pass-through traffic, which is ESP or 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐬, right, which is basically VPN, right? It will block all IPsec traffic, and also you can block SSL traffic based on the domain, right? So there are solutions like UltraSurf or other VPNs which uses SSL tunneling, right? It does not use IP. Even that can be detected and can be blocked on the firewall. So yes, all of this can
amazing,
be
sir,
blocked.
amazing.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, I mean, see, this product is very complex. It can actually give you security in a lot of aspects, right, which you can't even imagine, which is possible at this level. Why? Because it goes into every byte of data that is going through, right? It's when you send a packet, there are like 1,500 bytes of data that you're sending. So each 8-bit data is being looked into and and it checks what is it, right? There are evasive applications even, right? It's a cat and mouse game happening, right? Firewall vendors, right, come up with new signatures. The VPN providers or these kinds of evasive application comes with right new solution. So it's a cat and mouse game going on, right, and finding the right signature, blocking it. So yeah, this is very complex, right, and you can basically achieve a lot of things with Palo Alto, right, compared to other legacy firewalls, right, and that makes this right very desirable in the networking industry, right? Everybody wants somebody who has hands-on or who knows Palo Alto, right? You can take any interview, you can talk about any job that you find in LinkedIn or other portals, right?
Yes,
Everyone is
yes,
loving
sir.
Palo Alto, right? Why? Because they are leading the industry.
And
That's
sir, if we do CCNA and CCNP and RC and then go to the firewall like Palo Alto, so we will be in a blue team, na? In cybersecurity blue team.
Correct.
Working as a blue team.
Firewall is more like a blue team, right? Why? Because you are basically building up a security network inside your company, right? The red team is basically the penetration testing team.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Who does right check for vulnerabilities in the network. And the funny part is that, right, talking from personal experience, I have seen with a lot of VAPT reports coming in, right, for Palo Alto, and the only thing that they can talk about is some SSL cipher being weak. They are not even able to get right shell access or basic ping access to inside hosts. That complex the security is. So that's a different story altogether.
VAPT is also done on firewalls. I didn't know that.
Definitely. I mean, you can do it on firewall. You can compromise a firewall, right? Why not compromise the firewall and then to compromise the entire network, right?
Yes,
it's
sir.
possible.
Yes, sir. Absolutely right, sir. Thank
you.
Sir,
is there any prerequisite for this course, like definitely routing and switching?
The basic networking, right? I would say the basic networking is the so a CCNA level understanding is the basic, right? So you should be able to connect, when I say, right, an SSL connection, or what is a basic routing, right, static routing, or what is a TCP header, right, an SSL handshake happening, IPsec, right, for example. That is the basic, not too much into Palo Alto. Palo Alto basics we will be covering.
Right. And so I'm not able to understand what exactly is the significance of having zones. Like I've heard about firewalls. I'm not a firewall guy, but heard we have 3 interfaces in our DMZ. We can say
that's a classic approach, right? Right. That's a classic approach of inside, outside DMZ, right?
So what have we gained by bringing the zones into the zone concept into this Palo Alto? What exactly have we gained from the previous, classic structure that we were following?
So previous the legacy firewalls, right? We don't have that kind of interfaces. So we don't have that many interfaces in the data plane, right? That means a company might have one connection coming from the inside network, right, and one going outside, right? So this is the classic architecture that everybody knows. Inside, so this is the inside network. This is the DMZ, and this one is the outside or untrust, right? That is a classic architecture. Now, gone are those days, right? Companies have multiple departments. It might be spread across a campus, right? A lot of interfaces is needed. So for example, right, if you take a PA 3020, right, or a 3060, it comes with, right, 6 plus 2 SFP, right? So 8 interfaces altogether. That means you can connect 8 ports basically, and One of them will be connected towards the internet, right? And all of the other 7, right? You can connect different departments, different buildings, all of that. So the idea of using a zone is that it's a human-friendly architecture. That means when you want to create a policy, right? Let's say you are the security engineer, right? Or the Palo Alto engineer in a company, and your end user, right, is requesting for access to a banking website, let's say, right? So you know that, hey, he is sitting in the office, right, trying to access a banking website, let's say hdfc.com, right? So what you want to know, so you know how the traffic is flowing, you know the security policy should be from trust to untrust, right, allowing hdfc.com, right? So whereas if you keep using an interface, that's a legacy approach, right? You cannot memorize when it comes 1 or 2 interfaces, okay, right? Going forward, right, when you have 8 interfaces, when you have a 5K, you have more, right, 16 interface, all of that, it makes very difficult, right? And it's very easy to group firewall rules based on zones, control traffic flow based on zones, right? So the architecture zones is that easy to create policies and easy to understand. Even if you're taking over a new network, by looking into the security rule base itself, you can understand, okay, this is traffic allowing right, inbound connection towards my XMTP email server, right? All of that.
My
Yes,
question.
hello.
Yep.
Hello.
Router and firewall. So which one comes above? Because if one internet connection coming inside our company, then first comes through firewall or first connect through router, then firewall, then switch.
So that is a good question, right? That is more into a design level. Why? Because it depends on what kind of network you're running, how many end users, right, or how much traffic you're going to handle. So when for a large enterprise, let's say you take the Pune TCS office, let's say, right?
Yes.
Your ISP connection would not terminate on the firewall. Instead, there would be a core router. That means a dedicated device which is capable of hardcore routing, learning lot of routes. A firewall is not a route. It is capable of routing traffic, but it is not going to be used for a large enterprise network to terminate BGP or OSPF neighborship with. Why? Because the sole purpose of firewall, right, is to achieve firewalling and achieve basic routing. When you have a very large, right, routing information base and all you want to terminate with, you use a core router. For an enterprise, let's say a small branch office, right? You have, let's say 10 to 15 or 25 users. You would not invest, right, on a 50K or I don't say 50K even, right? A 5 lakh router, right, with licensing, right? You just go with a basic TA220 firewall, which can terminate all the basic routing protocols and take care of routing as well as firewall. So it depends, boils down to how many amount of users you have and how much amount of routes and routing is going to be terminated on this device. So firewall can do routing, but for large enterprises, they will have a core router in place. Why? Because the routing information base has every device has a maximum number of routes it can learn, right? So whereas a core router is a dedicated device with specific CPUs and optimized for routing, right? So it boils down to that design level where you want to place a router, right? Where you want to keep it or terminate on the firewall. That boils down to the requirement.
Actually, talking about MNC company only.
Yeah, I mean, MNC in the sense it boils down to what is the number of users that they have, right? And what is the routing neighborship they are forming with. If they are forming, let's say, right, Anna, you want to have security in, let's say, Airtel or Jio ISP network. They would not terminate this on a firewall. Why? Because they are an ISP. They would be forming routing neighborship with hundreds of hundreds of routers. Your firewall is not the good choice for that. You place a core router for that. A router is capable of routing only, right? So for that instances, you buy a router, you keep it in front of the firewall, and then, right, that all neighborship will terminate there, and then the traffic will flow through, right? So it is that architecture that where you place that. It's more into design, that part.
And one more question, Palo Alto is the hardware-based firewall or software-based firewall?
That's a good question, right? That's the next topic that I wanted to talk about. So Palo Alto, right? It comes with two form factors, right? One is the physical one, right? You buy a box, right? Right? It comes with CPU, right? Everything inbound, right? And you license it and you can use it. That's physical box. It has a VM variant as well. That means it's a virtual machine that you can run on VMware, ESXi, right? Hyper-V, AWS, right? All of that, Azure, right? You can use any cloud or on-prem virtualization platform and run this VM, right? You can run the Palo Alto VM on your 𝐍𝐤𝐳𝐬 setup or 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐠𝐬, right? Unit labs, whatever you call it, right? It's a VM. You can run it on any architecture as such, right? Even GCP.
Hello.
Yep.
Sorry for interruption, sir. Actually, I installed Palo Alto Firewall in GNS application, but when I put it user ID and password, no admin, it's many times it's showing incorrect like that. And I just tried in VirtualBox also, Oracle VirtualBox. We are getting the same issue like that. So what is the issue actually, sir?
I mean, that we have to look into, right? I mean, typically a standalone firewall, right? Deploying on a KMU and all, right? It requires at least 4 GB of RAM, right? And you need basic licensing to start with, right? Yeah, that's a different question that we can answer on a different session. But yeah, this is totally deployable. I have deployed it hundreds of times. So yeah, this is something that we can deal with on a later day, right? This being a demonstration, I don't want to make it a troubleshooting session for a Palo Alto login issue, basically. But yeah, that's the default password is admin. But there could be a difference if you've downloaded it from a different or the 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐠𝐬 or a customized VM platform. If you've downloaded it, it's a good opportunity to look into that documentation if there is different password used. But the standard architecture is right for any VM instances of Palo. When you boot it up, initially it will not take the password. You see an error, management server connection failed, right? And you just need to wait. That, and if you give a 4 GB RAM, just give it 15 to 20 minutes, right? It takes some time for a VM. Why? Because you need to give a lot of RAM for it to work. Actually, it's very hard to deploy it in a 8 GB RAM setup and all, right? So, but yeah, if you get that error, nothing to do, right? Just wait, give it some time, come back, try the same credential and it will work.
And one more question, sir.
Yep.
Sir, what is the minimum networking experience required to learn the Palo Alto? Currently, we are working as a NOC engineer. So can we start to learn Palo Alto? We have almost 4 years of experience.
Partially, you're ready to get trained. Actually, there are people learning, right, who are just fresh out of college, right, who has only the networking understanding from a college perspective. So I would say anybody who has a basic idea about networking, that is a CCNA level understanding of what is IP, what is TCP, UDP, what is an SSL, IPsec, he is ready to learn Palo Alto, right? It is very easy as such to learn it systematically. When you think of reading, right, all of that, there is a ton of documentation, ton of videos, right, which might confuse you. There is a systematic way or a curriculum that we have set up, right, which you follow. And when you are going through that basics, you will automatically start asking questions, and that is when you will start learning it. So it's very easy to learn if you go into that approach where you learn it on a one-on-one basic consist or on a pattern. Right? It's not like you learn Global Protect first, right? Then you come to Panorama, then you talk about packet flow. No, then you can't understand. First thing is the architecture, the design, how the packet handling happens on Palo Alto, right? The basic, I mean, I would say the initial part is theory, right? To understand how the firewall is doing all of this magic. And then you talk about features, right? What you can call as remote VPN, right? GP, or you talk about Panorama, clientless VPN, user ID, right? High availability, HA, right? Active setup, all of that, right? So your foundation should be strong before you go into deep dive into other complex, right? When you talk about, say, prediction, all of that, right? It's very interesting to talk about all of that. But for that, you have to be patient. You have to go through the basics, right? First, the strong foundation is the stepping stone to understand, right, or work on Palo Alto with ease. And once you learn it, right, there is no way that you can forget it. It's that easy, to be honest.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, one thing I
Thank you,
would like to
sir.
ask. Hello.
Yep.
Yeah. This is Palo Alto is a security device. So, is it necessary to have some basic idea about the security part?
So that is what I'm thinking, right? So security part, right? There is no, whatever you've learned at Cisco, that is not needed in Palo Alto. That's the funny part, right? Your ACL, all of that is gone, right? In Palo. That is why I'm saying it's very easy to understand Palo Alto. Everything is in GUI, right? Everything is in GUI. You can do it, right? From the GUI, it's very user friendly as such, right? And everything that you do on GUI can be done on CLI if needed. But right, typically enterprises or people or SOC team handling these firewalls, they prefer GUI. Why? Because you can save time. It's very easy. But right, when you become a guru, definitely you can opt to CLI, go for CLI options. Is it possible? But
Sir,
yeah.
hello.
Yep.
Yes, sir. You have explained the zones actually. We understand that the inbound traffic is like incoming, and that is a trusted one, and the outgoing is untrusted. What is DMZ actually? We often use to listen that word. Yes.
That is a classic architectural question, right? What does DMZ, right? DMZ stands for demilitarized zone, right?
Yeah.
So what it basically means is every company, right, will have some kind of servers which it needs to connect to external, right? Servers, right? It could be mail servers, it could be file servers, right? All of that is basically server is all servers are put into a DMZ where you can control your internal access. That means your internal users trying to use a file server, as well as these servers being accessed from external, right, remote users, or it can be these servers talking out. So that's it, right? You go all your servers into a different zone, DMZ, and you strictly control your servers. That's it.
Means like we have internal public IP for internal access, and maybe the public IP we use for the external one on the servers.
Right. I mean, yeah, of course, right. If it is external facing, there we need to have a public IP. Yes,
public IPs,
we use DNAT, right, for that to achieve. Yeah.
That netting we do inside the Palo Alto.
Right. Absolutely.
And when we use CLI mode, like maybe like upgrading while upgrading the Palo Alto, or
upgrading can be done on GUI. So
GUI
I would say, right, complete everything is on GUI, right? CLI will come into picture during the initial setup, right, for 2 minutes maybe. Then hardcore troubleshooting when you want to do, right? So I'm talking about a TAC perspective. When you want to troubleshoot on a hardcore level, right, when you become, right, an expert with GUI and you feel like, okay, right, this is not the right way. When you talk about packets and you talk about something known as global counters, right, in Palo Alto, if you've heard, right, GC or global counters, which is like a magic tool that Palo Alto TAC uses, right? Any problem, check the global counters, see what is happening to the packets. Easily you can find out, right? Something is not working, set a filter, check the global counter. So CLI part, yes, once you become so experienced with GUI, you start exploring easier methods to troubleshoot issues. That is when, right? We can talk about all of that, right? On CLI.
We started from basics because we don't know.
Yeah, that all is possible. Yes. The first understanding is to get very familiar with the GUI, right? That is the first task. Right? CLI is the next one. Why? Because it's not without CLI you can survive, right? Now CLI is not needed unless you lose access to GUI, which is a very bad day if that happens, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
This is Hemant. Is it a PCNSA and PCNSA, or else the collection of both?
So this training, right, will equip you for PC, NSA and NSE. So this is more onto a deep PC, NSE level. After completion of this course, you can easily clear PC, NSA. PC, NSE is, right, more into the basics, right, or the functioning part. So it stresses more on how the different features or how the different policies take into effect. So that, right, compared to PCNSA is little more mature certification. But yeah, we will be covering this curriculum in a way that you can easily clear PCNSC as such in that sort. Yes.
It covers all the PCNSC syllabus, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Including all the VPNs and the VPN.
You can talk about user ID, you can talk about HA, right? Global Protect, clientless VPN, right? We will talk about the curriculum in a bit, right? So that you can know what is there, what is not there. Yeah.
Yeah, including the VPN connectivity and including advertising the subnets networks that level, right?
Right.
And including the filtering as well.
Route filtering, if you're referring to, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Policy-based routing and all that.
Yeah, PBF and all is all basics, right? You should learn all of that. Yes.
Okay, fine. What is the total duration of this course?
So it could be right anywhere. I mean, there is no set duration, but we are planning right anywhere between 35 to 40 hours of training.
Okay.
It would be on weekends.
This would be a weekday, if I'm not wrong.
Okay.
Session. Yeah.
Yeah. This is on weekdays, guys.
Okay.
Weekdays is the best time. This is good for me.
All right.
Timings are the same, 9:30.
Yeah, 9:30 to 10:30 or 11. Depends on the topic.
Yeah, that is good actually. Fine.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Like, let me actually write. Yeah.
One more question here.
Hello. Go ahead.
Actually, Cisco, like that is the CCNA means Cisco. So Palo Alto, any specific company is there?
Yeah, the company name is Palo Alto Networks, right? Which is derived from a Palo Alto, which is a place right in California, right? So it's headquartered there in Santa Clara. So yes, the company name is Palo Alto Networks, which creates a firewall, right? Palo Alto next generation firewalls.
Hello.
Yep.
Sir, sorry for interruption. Actually, sir, how much we can expect after doing Palo Alto certification and course, and after getting the job, how much we can expect?
See that I would say, right, that is more like HR questions. That what I would say, right? I am talking about I have trained right a lot of people, and I have all of my folks right sitting at various MNCs. So I would say, right, I have seen freshers right without any prior, fresh out of college, right, coming with a CCNA to me. Right, they have got trained, right, even without even certifying PCNSC, right, with by purely demonstrating the strength on Palo Alto Firewall alone, they have easily been able to get right 3.54 package for a fresher, I'm saying, right. And when you talk about experienced folks, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, I mean, when you say 3+, yeah, you guys are in for a treat. Definitely, right, 10 plus is something that is the industry standard for Palo Alto, but provided that you know it, right? You don't fake it. There are a lot of people who fake it, right? I know Palo Alto, I can create policies, I can do netting, that's it, right? You don't know the rest of the features, right? Or you don't know how to troubleshoot. The main part of Palo Alto is that it's not configuring. Anybody can configure. You have the documentation publicly available. How to configure Global Protect? You search it, right? There is a step by anybody who knows how to read English can configure it. You cannot troubleshoot the problem. That's the problem. That is the main thing. For that, you need understanding. You need to know how these things work, right? Where to look when there is a problem. It's like plumbing, right? You need to know where the block is. Only then you can fix it. So that is the key part. If you know the stuff, right, for 10 plus easily you can get, right? So I'm saying from personal experience with a lot of folks, right, giving feedback on that. Yes. So this is a hot cake in the market. If you know Palo Alto, definitely scope is there, right? You can just go to LinkedIn, right? Today, before you sleep, go to LinkedIn, search, right, Palo Alto engineer, right? Network security engineer, just to Google search, right? Or go to Glassdoor, search Palo Alto engineer, right? Or TCS, Wipro. You take basic companies, right? You don't go for large enterprises. Basic companies, if you look into, you can see what is the standard package, right, for a network engineer with 1 year, 2 year experience, right? Then you will understand.
So can we deploy the Palo Alto on cloud as well?
Yes,
sir,
you can.
Hello, sir, and we don't have CCNA certificate, so it is mandatory to do this first CCNA, then go for Palo Alto or any security device? Like,
no, CCNA, right? I am not saying to take a certification, right? Certification is irrelevant to me. Right? What I need you to have is the basic understanding of networking. That means you should, if I say, right, this is an IP packet, this is a TCP, right? You should be able to visualize that, okay, this is right, IP layer 3, right? TCP layer 4, there is a source port, destination port. How can we do a NATing on a layer 4 port protocol, right? All of that is the basic fundamentals. That is what I don't expect you to come with Cisco right commands. That is right purely not useful in this scenario. Cisco commands, every vendor has its own command. There is no point in learning all of that, right? You can just Google search and get it. The whole concept is to understand these feature set, right? And what you can get from it, and how, if there is a problem, how do you fix it, or understand where the problem is and try to fix it. That is the idea. So CCNA certification is not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is CCNA level basic understanding of networking protocols, not Cisco products, right? I don't expect you to just give me commands to configure OSPF or RIP or BGP on Cisco router. No, that command anybody can get from internet. What I want to know is that, do you know about OSPF? Do you know about static routing, right? What is administrative distance? What is, right, the metric, route metric? All of that is the basic, right? That is what is required. You should be able to tell, right, hey, this is an SSL packet. If you, so basic, the classic skill of a network engineer is that you should be familiar with Wireshark, right? Which is like the butter, bread and butter for a network engineer is Wireshark. So you should have your Wireshark. You should be able to open up a packet capture and tell me, hey, this is an SSL packet capture, right? This is the SNI, or this is the server to which the connection is going, right? And it is using so and so cipher, right? I mean, the basic idea of SSL, right? That is what is required, not any vendor specific, right? I want you to be aware about networking altogether. So if I say, right, hey, this is an ICMP or ping packet, you should be able to visualize, okay, ICMP echo, right? Right, layer 3 protocol, it does not have layer 4 information, right? Coming through. How will the firewall take care of this? That is the idea. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
The ask is to just go through networking basics, right? ARP, DNS, DHCP, right? What is IPsec? What is SSL? All of that.
How much Wireshark knowledge is required? Like
Basic.
Basic. Like in CCNA, we didn't instructor don't teach firewall.
Right. Wireshark, right? I don't want you to be familiar with Wireshark options too much. I just want you to see, right? Go to CloudShark, download a right SSL packet capture or ICMP packet capture, right? Open it in Wireshark and see, right, how the packet will look like. That's it. Right?
Okay,
we just want to be familiar with. I don't want to expect you to be familiar with the Wireshark options. That is for a different day altogether.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Let me just quickly go through the curriculum, right? What we are going to cover. So you can expect, right? What is that you're going to get from this training, right? So the basics for starting, right? We will start with firewall components, different feature set, right? What is the packet flow, right? Classics. If anybody is experienced a little bit with Palo Alto, right? Life of packet. If you Google search Palo Alto life of packet, you will see a beautiful diagram with a lot of, right, bells and whistles. So that is what we'll cover the basic, right? Understanding how the firewall handles a packet, right? Fundamental, right? Basic management plane, what is data plane, what is to the box, right? What is through the box traffic, all of that. Then basic interfaces, right? What are the different types of interfaces that you can configure, right? Layer 2, switching interface, layer 3, right? Which has an interface IP there, right? vWire or virtual wire interface. What is a vWire? And right, a transparent deployment where you keep the firewall in a network. It is practically transparent. It does not even advertise an ARP address, right? It becomes invisible in the network, but still gives you the security. All of that, right? What is a tap interface, right? the classic IDS, intrusion detection system. That means you place a firewall somewhere in the corner, right, as an IDS tapped into the network. It will get a copy of packet, right, using something known as a span, right, switch port analyzer. That means every packet, a copy of every packet on the network is sent to the firewall just to analyze it. So typically firewall companies, right, let's say a Palo Alto sales team is approaching a large customer, right, to sell their firewall. They'll say, hey, keep our firewall in your network, and as a tap interface, right, send your traffic to Palo Alto, a copy of your traffic to Palo Alto, and see what it detects, and compare that result with your existing firewall. That is how they do the sales pitch, right? And they compare it with the existing firewall and Palo Alto. And the customer gets, right, very happy seeing that Palo Alto is detecting, right, 100,000 more, right, security events compared to the existing firewall. That is how, right, VWare, tap interfaces and all, right. This is the common use case. And there are other interfaces or other setups where they use multiple firewalls, right, for compliance, for government agencies and all. They use multi-layer firewall. There would be a checkpoint, there would be a Fortinet, there would be a Palo Alto. Everything comes managed, right, one after the other and all, for, right, for the high level of security. Right? All that is possible.
Sir, how, like, if we can compare it with Zscaler, so what's the difference with these, like Palo Alto and Zscaler?
Palo Alto is an on-prem firewall security solution where you have a firewall deployed on the customer network, right, or on a VM, right, or on the cloud, right, and your traffic goes through that, right, and you basically maintain the security policies, everything, and you handle all of the device, right, the internet connection to that, the power, everything is controlled, or you host it in a data center, all of that. Zscaler, right, is a SASE solution where, right, it's a secure access solution where, or more like a proxy which is sitting in the internet with multiple data centers all across the world. So that means you have a company, right, let's say in India, and you have users, right, who is traveling all around the world. If they want to access something internal, right, in your company sitting in Mumbai, right, a Mumbai server, they don't have to connect, right, entirely to India back, right. There is an architecture called, right, a shared DC, right, global architecture where they have a global footprint. That means Zscaler would have multiple data centers all around the world, right, and any of the data centers can be connected to, right. So technically speaking, Palo Alto security is a little more matured in that sort. But yeah, both are different segments altogether. But yeah, they are trying to compete, right, in that industry. But everything boomed with COVID.
Really, I'm trying to understand, sir, how they work actually. I do not have any knowledge for that. Like Zscaler, how they are basically on the cloud implementation, and they do not need any.
So you can say, right, Palo Alto Strata Firewall is not the competition. Palo Alto has a separate division called Prisma. Right, Prisma is a SASE solution. Prisma versus Zscaler is what is the current trend happening in the industry. Right, Prisma and Zscaler is actually competing with each other, right, and they have their own pros and cons on that.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. All right. So different types of interfaces, right? So we have a lot of time. What is tunnel? What is an aggregate, right? You call it as LACP or port channel, right, in Cisco. Right, port channel or PO, right? So you bundle interfaces, right? Or in Palo, we call it aggregate interfaces, right? Look back, what is a decrypt mirror interface, right? In Ssl Inspection, very interesting, this one, right? What is a VLAN interface, right? Virtual interfaces where you create for, right? A trunk port connected to a firewall, you have multi-VLAN data coming in, all of that. Right? Then interface management. This is very interesting and very tricky as well. But then I have seen like a lot of engineers, a lot of SOC team, right, getting confused in this concept alone, which is a very basic thing, but becomes very tricky. Right? And what is an interface management profile? What is an SSL TLS profile? Right? So in Palo Alto, you will hear the term profile too much. Everywhere there is a profile. It's like a code, right? Or you can give this code to anyone, right? It's a profile. You can use it at multiple places. Right, so you will see a lot of profiles going forward. Now, so all types of interfaces, that is what we are going to cover. Then the same things repeated, right? What is interface management profile? What is an SSL TLS profile? How do you set up the initial management, right? Configuration, on the firewall, right? You set up the management IP, gateway, subnet, DNS server, right? NPP. This is the basic that you do when you get a firewall. And then you get established the connection, and you start accessing, creating policy, right? Connecting other interfaces, all of that. 10. Yeah, this one is interesting, right? High availability, right? Very interesting topic. High availability, active, passive deployment, active, which is very, very complex, right? But very interesting assets, right? You have different types of links, HA1, HA2, HA3, right? Which you will talk about how the election works, how the clustering works, right? How the link and path monitoring, that automatic HA failover. When an ISP link goes down, the other firewall automatically takes over, right? You have typical companies will have two ISP connections, one with Airtel, one with Tata, right? The Airtel ISP goes down, ping, right? They ping 8.8 through Airtel, right? All of a sudden, the ping goes down. Immediately, the firewall identifies it, right? It brings back or basically failovers to the next firewall, which is using, right, a different ISP, right, altogether. I mean, there are multiple ways to achieve this, right? Multi-VR solution, right? Multi-VC solution, HA solution, all of that, right? We'll talk about all of that. What is bootstrapping, right? Now, everything is right coming to bootstrapping. That means when you deploy a firewall, it's right with a basic configuration file, right? Bootstrapping, everything comes preloaded, right? When a company buys 100 firewalls altogether and they want to start configuring it, the basic configuration is put into a file, right? And it's bootstrapped. That means when the firewall boots up, it takes up this file and it comes preloaded with that basic configuration that you want. So you don't have to do the same thing over and over again 100 times again, right? Bootstrapping altogether. We'll talk about all of that.
So just one question. As compared to the hardware firewall, are virtual firewall a bit slower in packet processing, or they provide us the same processing speed as
no, that's a very interesting question. Yes, no. Typically saying no, you get the same throughput as a firewall, physical firewall up to a mark, I would say, right? VM 300, VM 500, VM 700 series and all. The requirement of RAM, right, goes high, right? You can say 32 GB RAM and all it would need when you come to VM 700 and all. So you get up to VM 700 and all, you get the same performance. But when you talk about industry, I mean, core firewall level, right? Large enterprises with 7K series and all, right? A 7K series or 7000 series, 7060, 7080, 7020, all of that series, right? It's you can call it a big bomb altogether. That firewall, you go to Google, right? Search Palo Alto 7080. You will see a big, gigantic Almara size firewall, right? Each slot, we have a slot architecture there. Slot 1 data plane 0, slot S1 DP0, S1 S2 DP1, right? Multiple slot. Each slot is equal to 1 5K firewall. That is a huge firewall altogether. That you cannot achieve through VM. That has to be physical, right? Large enterprises. I don't want to take the company names, but large, you can think of large companies that you know of. They use banks, for example, right? They use these kinds of 7K devices, that too in HA, high availability, 2 devices. It's like 2 Almiras, right? Close to each other, right? A huge machine taking care of everything, multiple slots, lot of ports, right? You have that single firewall is not able to handle all of the traffic processing or the log processing. For that, we have multiple card. We call it LFC, right? Log forwarding card, LPC, log processing card, right? DPC, data processing card. We insert, it's like you have a floppy drive array where you insert what all modules you need. That big it is. That is used in you cannot scale up to that from a VM perspective. There is a limit where you can use hardware and VM and compare them both. But when you go to high-end series, that you cannot achieve through VM. Yeah.
So how this decision is made like, is it based on the number of the packet processing, or that we have to go for a high-end, hardware firewall?
Yeah.
Or
that right, when you engage with the sales team, right, they talk about numbers, how many users, total number of transactions on peak hours, right? How many amount of terabytes of data you are processing in an hour, right? Based on that, how many number of sessions do you need? Critical part is session, right? A company, there are 10,000 users, everybody is having 100 connections, right? Is your firewall able to handle all of this load? Yeah, that they do the baselining, and the sales team pitches, okay, this firewall would be apt for you. It can handle so and so sessions, right? It can handle this much SSL concurrent decryption, all of that. So that decision is made during the sales time, when the customer is asked about the current infrastructure, number of users, number of sessions, how many amount of traffic, or how much sessions do you want to inspect, all of that, right? Carefully they do that planning and suggest a good firewall.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right. All right, next one, right? Deploying security profiles, right? Everything in Palo Alto, we use a concept called security profiles, right? And it's very easy to configure, right? People think of, okay, right, app ID, or let's say, right, deep packet inspection, very complex to configure, right? No, you configure a security profile, you enable all the features. I want Wildfire, I want antivirus, and I want anti-spyware inspection, I want, right, URL filtering. I enable all of that in a profile. I call that profile in all the policies. Done. That's it. Very simple. But yeah, we have to go that in a systematic approach to understand how it is, right? What is URL filtering, right? Companies do URL filtering, right? In everywhere, right? They don't want social media. They don't want YouTube to be accessed inside the company network. All of that can be achieved, right? We can show you all of that in real time as such, right? Then there are a lot of other concepts, right, where you called credential theft, right? It's something not a very interesting concept, right? It would not allow, when you're in company and you try to log into any service, right, and you try to enter a password, which is your company password. So a common problem in the security industry is that password reuse, right? You have a corporate password, you are tend to reuse that password for your personal email, Facebook, right, YouTube, whatever it is. So if in corporate network, you try to use that password in any URL which is not company, corporate enterprise servers, right? So you try to use your corporate password for Facebook, for example. The firewall is intelligent enough to detect it, it will block it. It will not allow you to use that same password for any other services which is not part of corporate, right? It comes with a lot of, I mean, that is a little complex. It's used something known as a Bloom filter and all that we can talk about in detail essence, right? But yeah, very interesting, right? It's very fascinating to talk about all of that, right? How they are achieving all of this extraordinary features, right? Identifying which password you're entering, right? Comparing it with your corporate password, all of that. Then,
so that means there is a type of keylogger in firewall.
No keylogger, nothing. No, that's a different. It's a firewall. Firewall does not have the password. That's the funny part, right? It uses something known as a Bloom filter, which is a hash of the password, right?
Oh,
which
okay.
we'll talk about it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Then RBAC, right? Role-based access control, right? For if you've heard about AAA, right? Authentication, authorization, accounting, right? Classic terms that you would hear about, right? So TAC, Radius, right? SAML, right? Which all provides AAA access, right? Different methods of authentication, protocols which is classically used for authentication, right? You can connect to your firewall, right? Login. It can be for captive portal. It can be for global protect, right? How do you authenticate, right? And if you are a firewall administrator, what all a role you get a super admin access, you get, right, a reader access, you get a viewer access, right? All of that, right? Or if you have multiple, I want to use my Active Directory, LDAP authentication combined with Radius and SAML, everything together, right? I can achieve it using something known as an authentication sequence. For certain users, I want this particular authentication, right? If that doesn't work, I want SAML. If that doesn't work, the other one, right? All of that can be achieved using something known as an authentication sequence by chaining multiple authentication profiles together, right? So authentication is a very interesting topic, but very easy thing. Once you configure it, it is very difficult to break. And even if you break it, it's very easy to find out what is the problem, right? So authentication is an easy method to troubleshoot. Why? Because it's a binary operation. Either it's a success or either it's a fail, right? If it's a fail, you just need to know why it is failing. And that is very easy in Palo.
So, sir, radius authentication is done on those servers. Like they are
External
also
servers.
playing. They are also playing role in authentication. Like we don't need radius, or it will double check the authentication. That I mean to say how it works. Like
no, really, AAA concept is then there will be an external server, right? Which
yeah,
will
right.
be having the username
Okay,
and password.
those are in DMZ, right? As you told me.
It can be in DMZ, right? You can place it anywhere you want, right? Typically,
Okay.
yes, in DMZ.
Okay.
But the idea is that normally firewalls would be connected to via managed. This connection between your radius server and the firewall will happen through the management interface. So
Okay.
they might keep it in an isolated network even, right? So
Okay.
that all boils down to the company requirement.
So I mean, sir, once the user is trying to access any devices in the network, so it goes to the radius and the CACs. So where the firewall picture came into that, like it authenticate prior to the
So
radius.
you want to connect to a VPN, right? Let's say you want to connect to, you're sitting at your home. You want to connect to the company network, right? So you enter a company corporate username password in this small piece of software, right? That you have, right? It's a remote access client, right? Multiple things you might have heard about: Global Protect, Cisco AnyConnect, right? Zscaler, or right? Any small piece of software. You give that username password. It is going, that username password is going to the firewall, right? Encrypted in an SSL connection. The firewall will give this username password to the radius server, which in turn will confirm if this is valid or not. And
then we have to enter the passcode and all.
Right. Yeah, that is known as an MFA, right? Multi-factor authentication.
Multi-factor
authentication. Right. All of that. We'll talk about right what is 2FA, right? What is MFA, which is the common thing that you'll see push notification, right? 9-digit, right? Rotatable RSA token, right? Everything.
Token RSA.
Is this a firewall like Palo Alto and FortiGate will support AAA?
Yes. All major firewall vendors supports AAA. You can Cisco FTD, Checkpoint, Fortinet, Palo Alto, right? Why? Because that's a basic standard. Everyone supports it.
Okay, but then might be it is user TACACS rather than radius, right?
That is a different topic. Typically TACACS is not given for use for network access. It is for networking devices access, right? Command line control, all of that. TACACS just became open source. So not many people in the industry use TACACS. They use SAML, to be honest, right? SAML is why? Because it supports single sign-on. You just have to sign on once, right? You can use it for multiple authenticating at multiple places. You want to log into Microsoft Office, right? Or Office Mail, right? Everything happens with a single authentication, which is the
it will be like merging different ADs. We can merge it like that. You mean to say, sir? SAML basically for multiple ADs, we can get the access in single sign-on.
Not multiple ADs, right? Multiple ADs in the sense that's a different architecture altogether, right? You in a AD forest, there can be multiple active directories, right? Which is a redundant server setup. But typically an enterprise, right? You have a 10,000 user company. All of that, 10,000 usernames are there in that AD, which would be connecting or syncing to the SAML, right? IDP provider, and they know about all of the 10,000 usernames, right? So in that case, the single sign-on concept is you just log in once. You don't have to enter your username password again and again for everything. Right? One time you log in, same login session can be used for multiple things, right? To authenticate. So that's the whole together. You want, right, relaxed freedom of accessing different internal resources without having to enter username again and again. It is a repetitive task. That's whole. Right, SAML is what currently is being used in industry. Then comes the radius, right? TACACS, I would say, not so familiar, but still, I mean, TACACS people are using TACACS, yes, right? Cisco ACS, Cisco ICE, right? TACACS setup.
We are using TACACS in network devices, sir.
Correct. So that is what I was saying, right? Network access is normally radius, right? Network device control, mostly TACACS, right? Why? Because you get a lot more flexibility on that.
User and devices, something like access point.
Pardon me, I didn't get that.
It's okay, no problem. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. Sorry about that. All right.
I have one question.
Yep.
So what is the roadmap if we want to become a network security engineer?
See,
Like
always,
if we want to become a network engineer, so we have CCNA, then CCNP, and then CCIE expert level, correct?
right.
So do we have any like specific path? I mean,
See, that boils down right to the network industry is something that is always constantly changing, right? Why? Because previously Cisco was dominating that security industry, right? Cisco ASA time, PICS time, and all. Now, right, other vendors have started. Right, Checkpoint gave a solid competition. Now they moved seen first, right? Fortinet now Palo Alto leading the industry, right? So the idea of becoming an evergreen network engineer, right, is basically have one or two strong domains, right, which would be the topmost industry standards, right? Palo Alto, for example, right? You can take Checkpoint or Cisco FTD, right? The major providers of security, you need to have one or two expert level understand certification, right? If you go for expert level certification, definitely it has value, right? But that requires a lot of dedication, right? To be honest, to get that. But if you want to survive in the industry, the idea is that this industry is an ever-evolving thing, right? That means changes is something that is going to happen every now and then. So you have to keep updated, right? But the good part about this industry is that the job security on this field is immense. It's like a government job. You will never be fired from a security industry. Now what is happening is people are jumping between jobs. Why? Because companies are poaching people from each other, right? Why? Because there is a skill shortage in network security industry. And this business is booming. COVID-19 has indirectly played a positive factor in this. Why? Because people started working from home. Everybody wanted remote access. Security became a huge problem, right? People are sitting at office, right? I mean,
so if we compare with the, let's compare with the cloud domain. So if I compare with the cloud domain, the security is the higher, or I mean, hope you're getting my point.
Security will be always security. If you take cloud, right, this everything in security is just moving to cloud, right? That is the idea. It is not that in cloud something, right? In security, right, the terminology is ABC. When you move to cloud, it is DEF. No, not like that. The idea is that previously, right, everybody is looking, right, currently the industry standard is every company has a physical or a VM firewall deployed in their office itself. Instead of that, everything is moving to cloud, right? You have higher reliability. You don't have to take care of the rack. You don't have to pay for, right, hosting it. You don't have to pay for the internet. You don't have to pay for electricity. Everything, right, boils down to a monthly fee where you are hosting it in the cloud, right? And you have features like auto scaling, right, fault tolerance, right, high uptime, all of that. But this industry remains the same. Whatever you've learned will be the same. If you take Prisma and start a firewall, the firewall working policy, everything is same. Only thing is this is on-prem, that is deployed in cloud. That's it.
Sir, which solution like Prisma, you said, is it more costly than the VM we are deploying you because it's a heavy machine and all? So like it is more costly than the hardware we are installing as compared to?
That depends. I mean, VM is typically, right, less costlier compared to physical models, right, for starting stage. But mainly part, right, in Palo, the hardware is not that costly. The cost is actually in the licensing. That is the trick. Right? Whatever features you want, right? You sell out in millions when you buy it. So I'm just taking a number, right? If you take PS 7080 with full-blown licensing, right, that would give you a dent of at least 25 crore. If you plan to buy a 7080 with all licenses included, right? That is only for 1 year. Right? Next year licensing, licensing is not a permanent, right? You have 1 year, 2 year, 3 year licensing.
That's how,
recurring charge.
That's how they make the money. Yeah,
right. Right. And that is why this industry is booming, right? Everybody wants Palo Alto. So
right,
that's
right,
why we have a job security, right, of a government office.
Yeah, because usually, sir, like I had sometimes, like if we are deploying servers and VMs, people used to say like it's better to, hardware. Sometimes they have the hardwares installation is much required. That is very costly there. So people used to buy hardware sometimes as per the uses.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on, right, what is companies, what they do is, what is the ROI, right, return of investment. That is what they compare, right, how much they want to sell out on one go, and what is the return that they're getting, instead of, right, managing everything, right, hiring one guy to manage it, right, on site. If you have a firewall, let's say in Pune office, right, you need to have one guy who might be able to, or who should be there in the office to manage it, right? If something happens, somebody has to go there manually and fix it. If it's in VM, right, or it's a cloud, right, anybody can remotely
log
access
in
it and
from
work,
remotely,
right?
yeah.
A physical firewall, there is no physical things involved, right?
Yeah.
So all of
virtual
that,
or
right? Yeah.
So Kevin, how many years of experience you have?
For me, yeah, I have about 7-8 years, but that is not in SOC, right? I am coming from a pure TAC background, right?
Yeah.
So, and I have multi-vendor experience. It's not just Palo Alto, right? I have multi-vendor experience. You can name any vendor device.
So total experience is more, sir, than I guess. Like you are including all 7 years, huh?
Right. I mean, closing to 7 years.
Okay, so if I talk about mine experience, so I have 6 years of experience as a senior network engineer in network domain, and currently I've been working on the service provider core networks, Cisco ACI, the data center.
All right.
So if I'll choose the the Palo Alto, so would it be adding like the weightage in my resume? Or bit confused.
See, what is your ambition? What do you think? Do you want to survive on the routing and switching domain, which is gradually failing over to SD-WAN, right? Or do you want to come to security industry where everything will be green at least for the next 10-20 years? That is a call that you need to. Routing and switching, right, slowly is getting automated, right? Everything is getting automated from a routing and switching domain. But security industry, no, not like that. Why? Because on security, right, the concept of, right, or endpoint, I mean, automatic detection, orchestration, everything is coming, but still there is a human head required in between, right? It has to have that intelligence of a human to understand what is a threat, how to block it, right? If it is a DDoS attack, how do you prevent it? All of that, right? So that's a question that you want to ask.
Do we have any tool like SD-WAN, like we are optimizing our like traditional network to the we are optimizing our traditional network with the help of SD-WAN, correct? So do we have any kind of tool in security domain as well, like who will optimize all the this security technology like Palo Alto checkpoint, etc. in one page?
See, there are other, like you've heard about 𝐊𝐳𝐬 and all, right?
No,
they have some tools.
Actually, I do not have any experience.
Oh, okay. So see, automation is not something that people will do. There is Python level, right, API based scripting that you can do, right, where a theme response can trigger. So like, for example, right, I mean, these are what I've seen commonly, right? Companies would have a common rule where let's say, right, they are seeing a lot of transaction coming from one public IP, right? A lot of SYN packet being flooded to my web server public IP, I mean web server's IP from one single IP. It gets, we can configure something on Palo where it generates a log, right, when these kinds of events happen. And I can set up a SIEM tool, right, where if it gets such an alert, what it is going to do is it's going to invoke a API call to the firewall, right, with that IP as the parameter. What it does is it will immediately put in a block, right? I mean, that is crypto. I mean, in Palo, there is an automatic function as well, right, where it can actually automatically block incoming requests when it sees an abuse.
Like for a network engineer, we have CCNA, then CCNP, then CCI. So in Palo Alto, this is the only thing we can, expertise ourselves, correct?
Correct. PC and CC in Palo. I am also coming from a Cisco background, so I'm saying Cisco, right? Major money making part of Cisco, right, is routing and switching domain first. Then it comes, right, I would say, is certifications, right? Learning is a very money making industry for Cisco. Certification is a large industry for Cisco. Whereas Palo Alto is not into that business, right? It's purely based on the revenue is purely coming from the product, the renewals, all of that.
Okay.
So they don't give too much stress on having multiple levels of certifications, but they want to have a unique one or two certifications for a product, which makes you an expert level understanding. They are not going to sell that certification. I see PCNSE is not, you will see a lot of people with PCNSE. That is not what companies want. When you go for an interview, right, where Palo Alto is there in the JD, right, they are going to ask you basic questions, right? Hey, this is a classic question that you would get, right? There are two classic questions. One is, I am accessing Google. Can you explain the complete packet flow if there is a firewall in between, right? That's a classic. You have to talk about from ARP, right, to SSL, right? You have to talk about everything. Then the other question is, how do you troubleshoot, right? I've taken a lot of interviews, and typically what we ask is, hey, can you tell me how do you troubleshoot if you have a user complaining, right? He is not able to access Facebook.com. How would you troubleshoot it? What is your approach? And when you come to the Palo Alto Firewall, what would you look, right? And how would you identify what is the problem? How do you fix it, right? So that is the knowledge that is required. Certification is not going to
Okay, so in
give you a
simple,
boost
but I
in
can
that.
say, I mean, security engineer, will survive in market in a good way, as per like my understanding, whatever I have gained from this session.
Absolutely, right. I mean, I can give you in return that network security is not going to perish anytime soon. It's just booming. You can just go, right, search what is the market opening for network security engineers. There is tons of opening. People are finding it difficult to hire, right, the right candidate, right? There is skill shortages in this industry, because not many people are there to give this skill set that companies are requiring. So yeah, this is absolutely in demand. Rest be assured, right?
Sir, please include the interview questions as well, like while so that we'll get to know how we have to prepare.
Once you talk about different topics, right, I might ask you, hey, how would you fix it? I mean, troubleshooting, we have a dedication. So I was just talking about that, right? So let's, in the interest of time, right, let's just quickly go through what all things that we cover, right, and then I'll take the questions. So AAA concept, right? RBAC part. Then let's come to certificate, right? How do you use certificates? There is something known as certificate profiles, right? SSL TLS profile and certificate profiles, right? Where do we use it? Where do we use a certificate? What is the difference between SSL TLS profile and what is the difference between a certificate profile, right? What is certificate chain, right? How do you chain a certificate? Why is chaining important, right? Then talking about routing, right? Somebody asked about this, right? Dynamic routing, BGP, OSPF, right? Static routing, redistribution profiles, right? You learn routes from OSPF, right? Redistribute it to BGP, right? Or you have 100 static route, you want to redistribute it to, right, OSPF. What is route monitoring, right? If a path goes down, right, I want route removal to happen. What is PBF, policy-based forwarding, right? Or in Cisco, right? What was the name in Cisco?
PBR.
PBR, right? Policy-based routing, right? Right. So you configure.
So it's behaving like a router, sir. You mean to say?
No, the firewall is capable of routing as well as firewalling.
Okay.
That's the idea, right? So PBF, right? What is a virtual router, right? We'll also talk about what is a VSys, right? Deployment, right? So that from configuring routing perspective, yes, then NAT, right? Different types of NAT rules, right? NAT policy, security rules, what is source NAT, what is no NAT, right? Very important scenario. What is no NAT, right? This is an interesting topic that we want to discuss. What is U-turn NAT, right? Or hairpin NAT, another name for this is hairpin NAT or U-turn NAT, right? How do you
basically, sir, we use this hairpinning in ASA as well, no?
Yeah, this is networking.
I really don't know about this hairpinning.
This is a networking concept. This is
what actually we do actually in hairpinning. No?
Right, hairpinning or U-turn NAT is not a Palo Alto specific topic. It is a concept in networking. Yeah. So every vendor you can achieve this, right? U-turn NAT.
So destination NAT is also there.
I mean, NAT, everything is common. DNAT is the common thing that we will address first. Then right, source NAT and DNAT is something that is basic. Right? And then we'll talk about more complex stuff. So then Let's see. So we have IPsec, right? Very interesting topic again. IPsec GRE, right? What is Palo Alto is a route-based VPN, whereas Cisco ASA is a policy-based VPN, right? What is your in Cisco we call it as traffic selector. In Palo Alto we call it proxy IDs, right? When to use a proxy ID, right? What is phase 1, phase 2 SA? Why do we need proxy ID? Multiple phase 2 SAs associated with proxy ID. Right, IPsec, there is a proprietary feature for Palo known as IPsec tunnel monitoring, right, which uses not the IKE dead pair detection, but it uses the internal ICMP ping response to find if a IPsec tunnel is not working. The P1, P2 might be up, but traffic flow might be affected, right? Like an ESP drop happening in the internet. Right, all of that can be detected and immediately IPsec tunnel failover can be done. All of that, right? We'll talk about this is one of my interesting topics to talk about, right? IPsec GRE and all. Then, right, what is a service router? Right? Very, very important part, right? This is what I was talking about. Management interface, right? You tell your firewall how do you contact the NTP server? How do you contact the radius server? How do you contact the LDAP server, right? Or how do you contact the update server to fetch the updates, right? You configure service routes, right? It can be default interface, which is the management. It can be custom, right? You can use Ethernet interfaces, right? Let's say your internet connected interface to connect to the update server, right? Or based on destination, if that service is not listed there, right? You can give an IP and tell the firewall, hey, firewall management plane, if you want to talk to this IP for any reason, use this service route, right? So this is, you are teaching, the firewall is a dumb device. You tell that firewall how to reach out to different servers, right? For management purposes, if the firewall wants to reach out to different services, how should it source the traffic from which interface it should send that? That is what the service route is, right? We'll talk about that in detail, right? Now, what is VSys, right? Destination route, multiple VSys concept, right? How to verify it, right? Very interesting CLI command is there. We will talk about QoS, right? Honestly speaking, right, QoS, they don't give much stress on QoS from Palo Alto perspective. Why? Because normally QoS, right, basic feature set is given. But yeah, we can add DSCP to toss values, right, for EF marking, all of that, right? But yeah, that's now, right, QoS and all is not done on firewall. If they want to do it, right, they keep a load balancer, right, or some other equipment in between, right, and do it. And they use it for bandwidth control for the specific application and all. But now typically ISPs actually ignore all of this marking, right? Why? Because people tend to use these initially for different purposes. Now they have become, right, more intelligent. They remove, even if you send a packet with EF marking, they will just strip it down and use the standard EF marking and send it. And we'll talk about all of that, right? QoS. Yeah, what is App ID, right? How do you create a security policy with App ID? How do you create a custom application, right, with port and protocol number alone? How do you use the custom signature-based application, right? We'll talk about that in basic as such. Why? Because that's a very more complex architecture of creating App ID signatures, which involves engaging the Palo Alto team itself, right, to get that signature generated and all. Then, right, yeah. So very interesting topic again, right? Remote access VPN or Global Protect, right? Everybody might have heard about this GP or Global Protect of Palo Alto, right? What is portal? What is gateway, right? What is clientless VPN? That means you don't need a VPN software installed on your system. You can just open a web browser and access, right, company internal web pages or resources, right, using a web browser. There is no client required. The client is that software. So clientless VPN, there is no software needed. You can open any browser and access this, right? So all of that we'll talk about. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt, sir.
Yeah,
sir, yes, sir. So we will learn IPsec from basics, or we have some understanding of IPsec.
Yeah, IPsec basic P1, right? What is IPsec messaging, right? The 6 main mode, quick mode, right? What is aggressive mode? That is what I am expecting you to come with. But definitely we can give a quick brush up session on that. but the expectation is that you just read on it and come, right? IPsec part, basic messaging. But from a Palo Alto perspective, we will be talking in depth.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So all of that, right? What is HIP, host information profile, right? How HIP combines OPSWAT, right? How we can use it, right? To learn different stages, right? If the firewall or endpoint protection is disabled, right? We will talk about very interesting topic in HIP. What is full tunneling? What is split tunneling? Right? All of that. Now, SSL inspection, which is something that you will see for every company, right? 90 or 70% of the internet traffic is now SSL, right? Nothing is HTTP now. Everything is SSL, right? HTTPS or HTTP inside SSL or TLS, right? So SSL inspection is something that every company will do now, right? Why? Because buying a very expensive firewall and not doing SSL inspection is a waste of money. So they will have SSL inspection, right? It can happen in both ways. That is outbound. That means somebody accessing Facebook, right? That traffic can be inspected. Or let's say you are a bank, right, hosting your net banking server. People from the internet is trying to access your right net banking web server. In that case, that's traffic coming inbound to your network. In that case, we use inbound decryption. Right? There are some fundamental differences between these two traffic flow and how difficult it is to decrypt. Right? Forward proxy being complex, this is more easier. Right? Inbound is more easier. We'll talk about that in top, right, detail. And also about SSH proxy, right, when you using RSA keys. Then Wildfire, right, one of the big selling points for Palo Alto, right? What is Wildfire? Zero-day attack prevention, right? How do we achieve that, right? How zero-day attacks like WannaCry can be detected, can be blocked, can be identified by Palo Alto, right? The typical SLA for Wildfire, how fast it can detect a problem in a new signature or new file that it feels suspicious, how it works, right? Very costly licensing altogether, Wildfire, but yeah, very mature solution, right? We will talk about something known as the WF500 box, which Palo Alto sells, right? Which is the physical box which can do Wildfire analysis. Right? We'll talk about that in brief. Yeah. All right. Then, yeah, one more topic, right? Panorama part. We will talk about Panorama, right? But this is not required from a PCNSC perspective, right? They don't stress on Panorama as such, but we will talk about Panorama, right? A company having, let's say, 20 or 50 firewalls, right? Individually managing everything, right? By logging into 50 different IPs, very hard. Instead, you can use a device called Panorama, right? All your 50 firewalls will connect to this device, and you can manage of all 50 firewalls configuration from this single device, right? And you can push configuration from here, right? There is a concept of template, right? And there is a concept of device group. There is concept like template stacking, right? Which we will talk about, right? Very interesting thing, but a little more complex when you come to Panorama, right? It's a little more time-taking topic, to be honest. But yeah, the solution is very interesting for a large, yeah.
Panorama is the one of the software like Jenkins.
No. This is it comes in both variants. It comes as a physical device. It comes as a VM as well. It is not a software. This is a Palo Alto VM or a physical box, right? Which you can deploy, and you configure all of your firewalls to connect to this device. And from here, you can manage your firewall configuration. So,
all firewall means different firewall will configure in this Panorama only.
Correct. So like, let's say, right, you have a company with offices in 10 different countries, right? And your headquarters is in India, let's say, right? You will keep your Panorama, right, in India. All of the other 10 firewalls will connect to your Panorama in India. And the global SOC team, right, will change the configuration from the Panorama and push it.
My question is actually only Palo Alto different company or Checkpoint?
No. You can only integrate Palo Alto. You cannot use other vendors with this. No. So Cisco has its own FMC, right? Firewall Management Center, right? Similarly, Palo Alto has Panorama. You can only link Palo firewalls. You cannot bring other vendor firewalls inside.
So we can manage and, sir, do the configuration in a one go, like all will get the configurations.
Correct.
So it's a kind of centralized management.
Yeah, like
we have in Is Dmz
and centralized management, right? Centralized manage and centralized logging. That is what it achieves.
Like we have the in SD-WAN,
Correct,
centralized.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, typically like SD-WAN, yes. Right. But yeah, single point where you can manage everything from. Right? That doesn't mean you can change. You cannot make changes in the firewall, right? There are some neat little tricks where you can do changes on the firewall as well as you can push from the Panorama. Yeah, that we'll talk about all of that, right, during that session. Then, right, what is device group? What is the hierarchy? What is the shared device group? Yeah, interesting topic. Pre-rules, what is local rules, what is post rules, right? What is default rules, different types of. This is a common interview question. This 423, right? This one is a common interview question that you would see. Then if you say Panorama, they will definitely ask this. Hey, can you tell me the rule order if you are pushing something from the Panorama, right, on the firewall, how the rules will look like, right? So shared pre-rules, right? Devices specific pre-rules, then the default one, right? The local, then the default, then the post. That we'll talk about, right? All of that. Then adding a firewall to a Panorama, right? Assigning it, right? Very quick, small topics which we can cover very fast. This one, this is very easy to be honest. Why? Because you just give one IP, that's it, right? You just need the logical flow there. That's it.
So the major security device is firewall only in any company, we can say.
Right. The Panorama is not a traffic processing device. Okay, don't mistake that Panorama can handle traffic. No, that is a management device to manage Palo Alto firewalls. If you don't have a firewall, right? Sorry, if you don't have a firewall, there is no use of a Panorama. Right? Panorama is to manage multiple Palo Alto firewalls. That's it. Yeah. So what is Panorama? Commit recovery feature, right? You made a mistake. You did a commit, right? That breaks the connection between the firewall and the Panorama. It can automatically detect this and, right, it will revert that change, right? It will undo that change and bring back the connection. So we'll talk about all of that, right? What is configuration backup? How do you set up dynamic and software updates? How do you upgrade your firewall, right? How do you import the firewall configuration to the Panorama, right? A neat little trick. We'll talk about the concept of log collectors and all, right? Why? Because this is a more in-depth topic, right? Which very big, large enterprises will only have. Why? Because Panorama can act as a different device known as log collector, which is only a device which will collect logs and save it, right? With RAID configuration, RAID 1 configuration, right? All of that. We'll talk about this, right? Interesting to know, but typically for entry level or mid level, not needed. This is an expert level thing that when you need and that too, not all companies have. If you take 100 companies, right, 1 or 2 might have, right, log collector deployment, right, local log collector, dedicated log collector deployment. That's why, because it's very costly to deploy, right? Not that easy as well. Then, right, log forwarding. How do you forward traffic logs, right, security logs to the Panorama or external tools, right? You have a Splunk, you have a IBM QRadar tool where you want to forward logs via syslog, right, via SNMP, right? Different methods you can.
So we can integrate it with Splunk as well, sir.
Right. Any SIEM tool you can integrate, right, which uses syslog, SNMP, right, all of that.
Okay.
You can
manage, like to monitor the logs and traffic.
Right. Okay. You can forward the logs from the firewall to any monitoring tool, and the
live action
team,
we have.
right, they can see it from there. They have a specific dashboard that they'll create there.
Okay, sir.
Then, right, updating. How to, right, upgrade a Palo Alto firewall, right? If it's a standalone firewall, if it's a high availability pair, how do you do it? How do you push it from Panorama? Right? How do you schedule and manage dynamic updates, right? Periodic updates, right? Like your antivirus gets, right, every 2-3 days you get a signature update, right? Similar to that, Palo Alto firewalls also get dynamic updates. We call it as app and threat update or content update, right? It comes typically every Tuesday and all, but it can vary, right? In a week, once or twice it will come, right? How do you schedule it? Automatically, your firewall should get new signatures, new threat data and all. Right. Then talking about troubleshooting, right? We'll troubleshoot everything that we have learned, right? Ipsec, GRE, right? Tunnel, what is a route-based tunnel, right? Your proxy ID causing problem, page 2 not coming up, tunnel monitoring issues. right? Troubleshooting is more, right, that I am interested in, where I expect you guys to come up with questions, right, and challenge me, right? How do you troubleshoot different problems, right? And this is the golden bullet for all problems. Packet capture, if you have, you can fix anything, right? PCAP is the last resort for everything. In Palo Alto, there is one more thing that we typically on a tag level. I'll just give you an introduction on that, but not in depth. Why? Because typically they don't do it on enterprise. Even if you're a SOC team, right, your company might not allow you to do that on your firewall. Why? Because if you make a mistake, you can bring down a firewall. That is known as a packet diagnostics, right? That is done by a tag guy normally, but we'll talk about it, right? But it is very interesting to know about. Then troubleshooting, right? Different routing protocols, right? Your redistribution problems, right? Your route is not learned to find which route, if table is pointing to which interface, right? Which next hop, all of that. Then, right, reporting, right? How do you understand, create, right, report groups, right? How do you email it, right? How do you configure reports to be sent out, right, on a weekly basis to email that you want, right, by using an email server and all. Then global protect, right? Common questions that are common issues that we see is with GP, right? Global protect problems. Clients are not able to access or connect to GP, right? Or not able to access certain resources when connected to global protect. All of that we'll talk about. We'll talk about NAT policies. Yeah, this is one typical issue. Traffic issues, right? Traffic is going right there. It is not working. It could be due to authentication problem. It could be because of decryption failure, right? It could be because of security policy denying the traffic. It could be because a wrong NAT rule is getting applied, right? So how do you find out which rule is being used for this particular traffic, right? How, by you looking into the session table, you can identify, right, from the CLI, right, or from the GUI session browser, you can find out which NAT rule, which security rule, which right decryption rule is being applied. All of that you can identify and know which way the traffic is going, right? And HA functions, right? How do you see how the HA monitor works, right? How the failover was triggered, right? Normal RCA cases that we see in TAC is that, right, customer might come with, hey, I had a failover yesterday, right? I want to know why it happened, right? Management is looking to understand why an HA failover happened. All of that, right? How do you find it? It's very easy, to be honest, right? Why? Because you can just look into the logs and get it, right? All of that. So this is the whole topic from that perspective, right? We're going to cover all of this.
Kevin,
Yep.
protocols like OSP of BGP in this one?
Yeah, so we will talk about, I mean, I'll show you how these things can be configured as such, right, from the firewall perspective, right? Actual deployment of these would be difficult because of licensing requirement and how coming up with other neighboring routers to achieve this, but it's fairly simple on that. But the major folks, see, bringing up a neighborship is very easy. You just give the right all of that parameters, right? Neighboring peers, right? We'll talk about that, how to configure it, right? And how to configure redistribution, right? All of that. But yeah, not on in-hand or on-hand deployment.
Calls also, right? In the firewall.
Pardon me, can you repeat that?
No, my question is, this course includes the routing protocols involvement in the security as well, right?
Right. I mean, this course will go through that routing, but not too much in depth, to be honest. Why? Because PCNSC does not stress on routing. Palo Alto does not want people to use Palo Alto as a routing equipment at the end of the day. They want them to use it as a firewall, but we will talk about how to deploy routing neighborships, right? How to redistribute routes.
These are the one of the topics, right? Security in OSP of BGP also we can publish. So that's the reason I asked.
That is the password or the PSK that you use in routing, right?
Okay.
To form neighborship, right? I mean, I know where you're going with. So that is right. Security in routing means, right, to form a neighborship, you have to have a PSK, right? A password, right, or a preset key, and these PSK has to match. Then only your routing will come up. That we can show you. I mean, there is a
Sure.
specific column. When you configure, you can call on both routers, right? On the both PS, you will configure the same PSK, and then only the routing neighborship will come up.
Okay, no problem, not an issue. Thank you.
Kevin, I have one question.
Yep.
Yeah. So Kevin, if someone is coming from a routing domain, routing switching domain, has an experience in that, if we go through this course, do we need to go for checkpoint as well, or since Palo Alto is the hot selling cake in the market right now?
See, if you learn about Palo Alto and then you start, if you get an opportunity to get a hands-on lab on checkpoint or Fortinet, right? Everything is same. The only thing is GUI is different, right? Options might sound different little bit, but everything remains the same. At the end of the day, same thing that is available in Palo Alto or less than that is available in other vendors. So it's just they don't have anything additional assets, right? When it comes to competition, no. So with this knowledge, if you get a hands-on lab, right, you can easily. But I would say, right, with 1 week with a physical device or a VM device, if you are able to get it right, you can easily learn that other thing.
Just I've seen most of the companies migrating from checkpoint to Palo Alto. That's the latest trend that I see.
Right, ASA to Palo, checkpoint to Palo, right? Now, typically what people will typically want is either Fortinet or Palo Alto. Palo Alto is more preferred, right? And that is the trend. And the same thing is happening. Why? Because but compared to Fortinet, we have a lot of options in Palo.
So that's why I was asking you this question. Should we go for checkpoint, or it's rather a good point to go for Fortinet instead of checkpoint once we learn Palo?
Yeah,
or Palo Alto is enough.
I would say, right, why you have to go for a different certificate if you already know, you will feel that, right? I would say take that decision yourself. Once you complete Palo Alto, go for or see some videos of open source videos of Palo, Fortinet or checkpoint, right? See what is there different. The only difference that you will see is that the GUI is different, options look different, but the core concept remains the same. Only thing is the buttons that you click might be at different places. That's it, right? You don't need actual lot of effort to learn the other vendor once you know Palo Alto. Why? Because all of these features are already there, right? Everything. Only thing is that these many features will not be there in other vendor Palo. That's the only difficulty when you come to from leaving Palo Alto. The difficult decision is that you feel that other products are not as impressive as Palo. Why? Because it has a ton of features, and when you try to cover everything, it's not humanly possible. I think more than 113 features or so is there, and it's counting every release in 10.1. They're coming with more stuff. Right, so it's very hard to keep track of everything. And the thing is that you cannot use all of the features every day, right? There are special scenario features, right? When you talk about all of them, so very big topic altogether. Yeah, interesting to learn and pay in demand as such.
So, Kevin, so are we going to cover command line part as well?
Or yeah, the basic command line. Yes, we can cover the basic command line as such. Yes. But on detail, right? I mean, on troubleshooting, we will definitely cover some command line. Why? Because I believe that's the fundamentals. I think you should always know that. But configuration from command line, I'll show you a demo, right? And it's very easy. Why? Because you have a magic key called tab, right? When you get stuck, just hit tab. That's it.
So you mentioned about some troubleshooting part as well. So in that part,
we will talk about CLI. Yes, global counters, right? Packet diagnostic. We will just quickly go through that. Yes.
And one more thing. So are you going to share any notes as well after the class, or how we are?
That would be purely based on session. I'll try to generate some content as such, right? Probably, but